Hello again. So we're going to continue on with our Rails demos now. So this one is basically going to be our first kind of Hello World application with Rails. Now you see here on the screen this Rails guides. Basically, this is the getting started thing for Ruby on Rails, and this is what you're going to be working through for your homework assignment this week. And I just kind of want to give you a taste for where you're going to start. Now, for installing Rails, I will have some information in the guide again for you for what to do, but we have a couple of little caveats. So, first and foremost, Rails takes a while to install even on a reasonably spec'd out machine. Your micro instances are probably not going to cut it. And then if any of you try to get it up and running and you're successful, let me know. I was not able to get Rails to install on our micro instance. It just froze up eventually every single time. So what we're going to do is create a new compute instance with a little bit of a higher spec, and then you're just going to make sure that you turn it off when you're done. Otherwise, it'll consume all of your cloud credits just by merit of being on. So caveat number one. Caveat number two is that with this guide, it's going to assume that you're developing it on your own computer. So it's assuming that you're using Rails locally on your own machine. And what we're going to be doing is having it hosted up on Google Cloud so that anybody can, see it and view it. All that means is that you need to tweak the launch parameters slightly for Google Cloud because if you're running this as a local host application, meaning it's on your own computer, usually there's no issues browsing to it. But once it is on a quote unquote production server, you need to tweak, okay, what's the home IP address? We have to open up the particular ports. So slight difference here. And again, I'm going to let you go through the installation of everything here kind of on your own. It's really not that bad. It's just very time consuming. So get started early if you're watching this video early on in the week. But things we need Ruby, we need SQLite 3, which is a kind of like a simple SQL-based database used with a lot of mobile applications, Python applications, things like that. We're also going to need Node.js, which, learning how to install it now is going to save us some time later on when we get to React. And we're going to need Yarn to basically handle module installation. So I'm kind of skipping through this guide a little bit. These are all things you should be doing separately. And then we get to this gem install Rails section. So this is where Rails actually gets installed on your machine. All right, so I've got a virtual machine instance here, and I forgot to open up SSH, so hopefully this doesn't take too long. But I have already done all these steps. Rails is installed, Ruby's installed, all of the dependencies are installed. And again, there's guides up here, and I'll have separate guides for you as well. So Ruby -- version is going to be newer than this. So I'm at 3.1.0. This is the latest version of Ruby. That's what you'll all be using as well. SQLite 3 -- version. Did I copy something or did I do this wrong? Okay, I must have had a type. Oh, I had 3 dashes instead of 2. Silly me. Cancel that. Rails version. So Rails I've got is the latest version as well. So I'm good. Now, first things first, I'm going to create this blog application. I'm going to show you it getting up and running, and then basically from there on out, it's up to you to tweak it and configure it like I've got in the guides, basically. So I'm just going to do the initial setup here. So I'm going to remove the pre-existing blog that I made just to show that it works. Rails, new blog. So it's going to create a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of files. It's going to install all dependencies that I need for a simple blog. And what this is going to do is get you up and ready with an MVC application in Rails. And it honestly doesn't take that long to get up and running. So we're going to get an app directory, which has all of your kind of configurable, like your pages, your templates, routing, all that fun stuff. And your config directory, you're going to have some time into to tweak things and everything that you need and all that. But you'll get to there, don't worry. So next step, and this is where my steps pretty much end. We need to run the Rails server. Let's clear this out, and I'm going to say bin / Rails. Oops. I need to be in the blog directory. bin/Rails, so we're going to use their version of Rails server. Now, this is not going to work by default, just as a heads up. So what we see, booting Puma, booting Rails, okay, and we see listening on 127.0.0.1:3000. So it's running on the local host address, right? So this is our local host on port 3000. All right. Obviously, if I went to this address, it's not going to work because this is the local host to your Google Cloud instance. So with that knowledge in mind, you might say, okay, well, let's get the external IP of my server, which you should hopefully know how to do by now. Drop it in my URL bar. I'm going to go to it. Not going to work. Or it's going to show me the Apache default page because I have Apache installed. But it's running on port 3000. It's not going to work. Okay. This will even happen if you open up the ports in the various firewalls. This server is running on a production instance, which I kind of mentioned before. And what this means to you as the developer is that you need to tell Rails to run on host 0.0.0.0 when you launch it. And separately, you need to open up the firewall ports. Now, we did this in a separate video, and again, I'll have a little spiel in the guide about how to do that. We're going to use port 8080 because that's a nice web server port. So you're going to have to open it up in the Google Cloud Firewall. You'll have to open it up on your Ubuntu machines with that UFW command, and then we'll be set. So just as a kind of refresher in the Cloud Console, in our SSH window here, sudo ufw allow 8080. All right, so it's already there for me, but if you've never done this on this machine, it would say adding rule, right? In Google Cloud, you'd have to go to your firewall and then either add a new rule or inject it into the HTTP allowed range. So you see here that I've got 8080 allowed. I also did 3000 just for funsies, but again, 2 levels of firewall with Google Cloud. So the other part here is that I'm going to run our server again, but we're going to tweak it with some flags. And these are flags that you could, look up in the manual or in the, the Rails page. -b 0.0.0.0. This is telling us to run on basically the allow all address. So instead of 127.0.0.1, it's going to run on this address, which is basically going to be all addresses. And then we're going to give it a -p 8080. So run the server on port 8080. Enter again, and we're going to see, okay, listening on 0000:8080. Refresh this. It's not going to work because 3000 is wrong, 8080. And now we should see our Rails page. We see activity happening over here because the Rails server is handling things. And here's our blog. It's beautiful. All right, what are we seeing here in front of us though? This is just the default homepage for a Rails blog. If you want to add on different routes, meaning different page locations to see, you'd have to tweak that in your controller. If you wanted to talk to a database, that's all in the MVC aspect, which is something that you're going to do separately here. Okay. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it from my perspective to at least get you up and running. Good luck with your MVC applications, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.